Welcome to the OHouse SHHD heavy duty shaker repair training. I'm Nathaniel Pfeifert, and I'm going to be kind of guiding you through the repair of this heavy duty shaker unit. The purpose of this is to familiarize you with the disassembly, reassembly, calibration, repair, and testing of the heavy-duty shaker units. This training will be recorded, and the format's kind of going to go, we'll go through the repair, and then after the repair, at the end, we will be asking for questions. First of all, we're going to look at the safety precautions needed. For the safety precautions, for full safety precautions, refer to your service manual. But basically, number one, only connect this unit to the specified rated power supply and make sure the outlet is a grounded outlet before plugging in. Repair only in a safe, clean, dry environment. A general laboratory environment is usually the best. Make sure you repair on a sturdy, clean work surface that can't scratch the unit. As we zoom in, we'll show you we used a work surface with a soft tablecloth on it. The other thing is to always use ESD protection. So we're using this ESD wrist strap at all times when working with the electronic components. So I will always have this on. That way, as I go through, as I work with it, I won't have to remember to put it on when touching a circuit board or other electronic unit. So to familiarize you with this, I'm going to bring you down and zoom you in a little bit on this unit. So this is the digital version. The analog version functions very much like all our other analog units. We've already done a couple of repair trainings on them, so I won't bore you with going through the analogs. This is our digital. It has speed and time control, speed up, down, speed on, off. To get this to turn on, you would first plug it in, again, to the proper source. Plugging into the back. That gets you the initial setup and goes into standby. To turn it on, you would push the standby button. Difficult to see on the camera. The LEDs are not flashing as it appears on the camera. But your time would be adjusted here. Your speed would be adjusted here. That's actually set to 15 RPM and a time of 0. I'm going to turn that off so that it's not displaying oddly on the camera. Okay, we're going to unplug that. So going into the troubleshooting, what could be going wrong with this? Up here. So the first symptom is that the unit will not run. So the first thing we're going to be going through is a blown fuse. The unit could be excessively noisy. That could be a sensor fan misalignment, unit not shaking at the proper speed, E3s, E4s, E8. You can really refer to the troubleshooting guide for each of these symptoms. We're going to be giving you the tools for fixing those symptoms. Membrane switch is not functioning, unit is shaking irregularly, or unit does not show the display and beeps upon startup. Taking you back down here. Yeah, I can move that before the unit familiarization. You can also refer to your service manual for a list of tools. You can see these tools here on the table. That's what we're going to be using today. First thing we're going to be doing is showing you how to change a fuse. Can use a flathead screwdriver, really any flathead screwdriver, to get under and pop out the fuse drawer. The fuse drawer has 2 fuses in it. This is a non-blown fuse. Focus. A few seconds for it to focus. If the fuse was blown, it would have a black spot in the middle. But it's always a good idea if you have power issues, first thing, just try to change the fuse. And you would need to change both of them. Once changed, that simply just pops back into the fuse drawer. Now we're going to be talking about disassembly. And you can see as I'm going through this, this unit is on a turntable. This is very useful for easy assembly and disassembly of this unit. So the first thing we're going to do, take your flathead screwdriver, remove this mat, pry up and remove the mat. That can go off to the side. And we're going to remove the 4 screws from this tray. 1, 2. Number 2 screwdriver works better for this. 2, 3, 4. That whole tray can come off. I like to keep these screws right in the holes. As I move that off to the side, that keeps everything together. All right, next we're going to remove these 6 screws from around the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 more. And that top plate can pop off. Again, I like to keep the screws right with it. I dropped that one. Can you pick that one up for me, Evan? And that can go off to the side. All right. Now, let me bring you a little closer here. Now we're looking right down into the unit. we're going to remove these two screws that are holding the front panel on. Front bezel on, I should say, not front panel. 1, 2. Loosen them up. And then there are 2 screws down on the inside. I will show you them right after the bezel is taken off. You can loosen. These screws have both a nut and a screw, nut and a bolt. So you want to hold the underside as you're removing those. That can pull off. And you can see the screws that I loosened here and here. All right, now making sure I'm grounded, I'm going to disconnect the PCBA. Many of these connectors have an active locking system, so you want to push in the tab before pulling them up and off. And there you have the front bezel. That can go off to the side. Along with the screws. For analog units, before you can disassemble this, you're going to want to remove the tab. So you're going to disconnect the orange connector from the potentiometers here, and then remove this tab here. So it's going to go from that to that, and then you can slide the potentiometer out. Right now, today we're working with a digital one, so we don't have to do that. So on this front panel, if we were going to need to replace a front panel, this would peel up. You would get again, a small screwdriver, small flathead screwdriver under the corner, peel it up, and you could peel the whole front panel off. Once you have peeled the front panel at all, once you've bent these switches the opposite way, that front panel is no longer usable. So don't do that unless you're sure you're going to replace the front panel. But to replace the front panel, you would remove this connector here, peel the front panel, carefully re-stick a new one, and then reattach this connector. Continuing with the disassembly, there are 4 screws in back that we're going to remove. 2, 3, 1 more. As you're doing this, be careful to hold the back so it doesn't fall off. And before you can completely remove this, we're going to need to remove some wiring harnesses. So we're going to undo the wiring harness here from the power supply in here. That's just an MTA connector that gets unplugged. And then we're going to undo these screws, these hex screws here. I'm just going to use, so what we need to do, instead of having the, it's not a hex, it's not an Allen key that we need, it's a socket wrench.
Oh, it has to be.
Yeah, this is not an Allen, that's a standoff. So it's a socket wrench that we need over that. These come off. And then before we can take this off, we have one more screw here. Gets undone with the ground connection. And again, set this assembly aside for reinstallation later. Again, keep all necessary screws. Next, we're going to take out the power supply here. We've already removed one of the screws down here. So now we're going to remove the other power supply screw on the other side of the power supply. Power supply itself can come out. To do that, we're going to cut these 3 wire ties, or just remove the second connector from that, and then the power supply can come loose. Right now I'm going to keep the connector with the power supply and keep the screw with the power supply. Do we have, yeah, we have wire ties for reassembly. If you do cut the wire ties, remember to remove them so that there's nothing loose inside the unit. Next, we have 3 more screws here. 1, 2, 3, and the one side of the unit has come loose. Again, I leave the screws in position as I move it off to the side. Next is the other side, which is just 3 screws here, here, and here. One, 2, 3. Keep the screws with it as you put it off to the side. Okay, next we're going to the bottom of the unit. And we're going to remove the base plate by removing these 4 feet.
Are there holes in this? Oh, it looks like the standoff's kind of like in the hole.
Yeah, that's okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, and these 2 as well. Before removing that, we just have one more wire tie to cut. There. And the plate comes off. Go off to the side. Now we're going to talk about replacing the V-belt. So in order to replace the V-belt, this panel here needs to come off.
So for that, you would just mention like this, the entire shaker base.
Yes, this is the entire shaker base assembly that you would be replacing. That would come with all the wires, right?
Yes.
Okay. So next we're going to talk about replacing the V-belt here. In case you don't have to replace the entire shaker base, you can by removing these 9 screws. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. By removing those, you can now get to the V-belt. It's going to come off. Again, these are going back into the plate. They're going to be set aside for being put back together. And that goes off. Along with the screw that I dropped. Okay, so now that we have that off, we have access to the V-belt. To undo those, to undo this, and remove the V-belt, we're going to loosen. Be very careful. We don't. Going to loosen these two.
Wait, did you get the, oh yeah, you went to get that thing, right?
Oh, this, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So we'll loosen those two. This will push forward. Current V-belt can pop off. To reassemble, put the V-belt into the slot, put the V-belt into the slot on the other pulley, turn it around, and turn it so that it falls into place. Now we're going to take our tensioner.
so, for the motor,
Yes,
you probably
so
want
we
to,
want to go straight to the motor.
yeah.
All right. So once you have the V-belt off, we can go straight into replacing the motor. To do that, we're going to remove this pulley entirely. To replace the V-belt, you don't have to remove it entirely. In fact, it's better if you don't. But if you're going all the way to the motor, pull that off. Undo these 3 screws, right? Or is it this entire assembly?
Yes, the entire assembly.
The
'Cause it's
entire
like
assembly,
attached.
okay. All right. So then, to remove this, you would have to cut all the wires off, cut all the wire ties, remove it entirely. This comes off, a new one will be put on. The orange, red, and yellow go around to the left. The black, yellow, white, and blue go around to the right in this configuration. They would need to be wire tied back down. And then these would go back on. The V-belt will go back on. These get just lightly tightened. You don't want this too tight so that you can tension it. They just need to go down slightly. Next, you're going to take your force gauge and you're going to set this to 5 pounds.
It's 5 pounds, not 8.
This one's 5, the other one's 8.
Oh,
So in order to do this, you're going to
Yeah.
zero the force gauge. Pull it to 5 pounds. Hold it steady. Tighten it down. To the proper torque. And you're done replacing the V-belt. Going to correctly attach all the wires, reattach all the wires. I have this open. Remember, we screwed up the positioning of that last time we closed it up.
Yeah.
So I'm going.
Was the cut wires in the checks?
No, it's this one.
This one, okay.
The rib wire is not great there. It's still attached, but it's not great. We're not doing any testing of it, so I'm not going to worry about it.
Right.
But I am going to worry about replacing these wire ties. Now, are we replacing this assembly as well? So I don't have that in the
The-
service manual.
Like the encoder disc?
The encoder disc, the sensor,
the
Yeah.
sensor here, but that's not part of the thing. I mean,
not part of the training.
all it does is has a magnet. Like,
Yep.
So you
We
would,
might be unofficially replacing it. Like we're only doing
Okay.
enough spare parts to cover 80%.
Yep.
It's a lot of like smaller spare parts up here in like the repair flow diagram.
Yeah.
That's how we replace it, but then we don't have like official documentation processes for that.
So I can basically just say,
yeah, you can talk about it.
yeah, well, I won't talk specifically about this, but I'll say if you have any other issues that aren't covered in this repair training, please contact Mary.
Right. We could still do it. It might just be like
Yep.
not very attractive price.
Let me put this back in because originally I will not be taking any of this off during the repair. I'm going to do just that. Pull it off, say you would undo the rest of it.
Yeah. That took a while. And that's what you did with the homogenizer. I think I don't think
Yeah.
you went through each individual wire tie, taking them off. Put them back on.
Undo the wire ties. Here we have it. Can you get me, where'd it go? So we want the socket for that screw.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So next, I have in my presentation reattaching the feet, but I'm going to move this to the end. All right, so that is the shaker base. So now we have talked about replacing the motor. We've talked about replacing the V-belt. There are other components here. There are bearings. There's the encoder disc. There's the sensor. If you ever have any issues with those, you can give Mary a call, and she can help you work with those. Right now, this shaker base has been dealt with. Now we're going to talk about replacing the PCBA.
All I think is instead of saying narrative, we say customer service.
Customer service, yeah.
Just in case, narrative.
Yep. So we can move that out. We will move the PCBA in. And here, again, it's good to be grounded. If you're going to replace, or it's important to be ESD controlled. If you're going to replace the PCBA, you would remove the overlay, the membrane switch connector. You can do that by taking a flathead screwdriver and pushing it off. Next, you would undo these 4 screws. You would undo them gently, one at a time. Unscrewing them slightly, one at a time, and then going back and unscrewing them more until they're fully out. To put back, till all 4 of them are out. When the PCBA is out, you want to make sure that the viewing screens on the PCBA, on the membrane switch, stay clear. You don't want any dirt to get in there. To change out the PCBA, you simply drop it in so that the red LED goes in on the bottom here. The holes line up. The displays line up. Fits nicely into place. And re-screw all 4 of these screws. Don't tighten them down at first. Just put them in so that they are lightly holding the board. And then you're going to torque them to the proper torque found in your service manual after lightly installing them. It's important that all 4 screws go in lightly before installing, but before tightening them down, so that you don't bend the PCBA. And you're going to tighten them down in a diagonal pattern. After that's done, you can put back on the membrane switch connector. And your PCBA is installed. We'll go through installing the all the connectors when we put the entire unit back together. All right, next we're going to replace the shaker base. So here we have the shaker base. We're going to flip it over and replace the bottom tray. It's important to make sure the front of this is towards the front of the shaker base. You know that what's the front by where the wires are coming out. This goes on, the screw holes get lined up. Put in the 4 feet. Again, put all of them in before tightening down. Do these get locked tight? And then you're going to tighten them in a diagonal pattern. 1, 2,
Loctite 242.
3. So these get Loctite 242. 4. 6. Then go around one more time. 1, 2. Make sure they're all tightened into place. Proper torque. And you have the base on. Flip over. Now you're going to put the rest of it back together. Once that's on, you can put the plate back on top here. Now, it's important so that this doesn't jam that all 4 of these are in the same position. So I like to move them to the top right with one of the screws in the triangle facing towards the top. That makes it very easy for us to put this on and screw it into place. One. And we're not screwing it down tightly yet. Remember the proper Loctite and torque settings found in your manual. All right. Once we have them all lightly tightened, you're going to go back and torque them to the proper settings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And that's on. Now you want to make sure that that moves freely. And we can replace the sides. I have to remember which side is which.
What do you need?
I have to remember which side
Oh,
is which.
so the flat thing is on the front.
So which side is the power supply on? Basically, that's what I'm.
Oh, that's the whole.
Wait a minute. You said the flat screw is on the front.
Yeah.
Okay. I gotta put that into my presentation. So as you put these back on, the screw that is flush with the side panel is going to go towards the front of the unit. So that's how you'll know which side which panel goes with. So again, put the screws in lightly, make sure they're all aligned. 1, 2, 3. And then you can screw them down to the proper torque setting. On each of this, remember the proper torque and lock tight. So we have one side. Next is the other side. This second side has the power supply in it. Again, flathead screw, flush screw here, goes towards the front. Put it into place. Three screws, and then torque it down to the proper settings. Four, 5, 6. Next, we're going to put on the power supply. So the power supply right now is just going in with one screw because the other one here, because the other one is going to hold the ground wire. So we put this into place, slide it in from the front. Take that screw and secure the front of the power supply. Now, if you simply unplugged this wire, you'll need to plug it back in. If, as I did, you took it completely out, we'll need to add 3 wire ties here. Here. And one more here. And snip the tails off of each of them. Next, we're going to reinstall the back of the unit. To do that, I'm going to put the RS-232 in place and screw that in. Get that.
Trying to fit it.
Okay, both sides. Going to reinstall the ground screw that holds the other side of the power supply in place. Reinstall power wire. And then attach the back with the 4 screws here, 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 and here. Torque them down to the torque specified in your manual. And then go back and torque each one in turn. Finally, we're going to install the front panel. There. That goes there. Nice thing about this is that you really can't insert these wrong. Okay, the bottom goes under the 2 screws that we loosened at first. They'll tighten down. Make sure it's nice and tight together. And make sure you don't over torque these. If they're over torqued, they can damage the plastic of the front panel. Now we're going to go down through here with these 2 screws, screw and a nut. Screw and a nut, tightening down. Again, use the proper torque and Loctite. These do have Loctite on them, right?
Those up top. Yeah, I think those don't.
They don't?
Yeah.
Wonder why you wouldn't.
Tray does. Screws for the tray.
And then we're going to put the plate on. Now the warning label goes towards the back left-hand corner. And these 6 screws get reinserted and torqued down to the proper torque. After you put them all in, make sure that you go diagonally and retighten them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we have the top tray. As always, proper torque and Loctite.
These actually, a lot of them don't.
To go through and see which ones do and which ones don't. Tray mat goes back on. And there you have it. See your manual for proper testing and packing. There's just one more thing that we're going to look at before ending, and that is the feet. These are an aesthetic-only red foot.
You want to turn it upside down? Do that.
Yeah. So if a foot falls off, all you're going to do, flip the whole unit upside down. Locate the threaded hole in the sheet metal and spin it back in. These 4 feet, the 4 black feet, are what the unit is sitting on. These red ones are strictly aesthetic. Flip the unit back over. And there you have it. That is your heavy-duty shaker. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Nick.
All right. Thank you for being part of the O-House heavy-duty shaker repair training.